The steady beep of the heart monitor echoed through the sterile room. The rhythmic sound was a quiet reminder of the passing seconds of life. Sunlight poured through the blinds of room 214, casting soft golden hues over the pale blanket that covered Marcus Jordan's frail body. His hands, rough from years of hard work and teaching, lay across the blanket, their dark skin weathered by the sun and the years. The quiet dignity that surrounded him stood in stark contrast to the sterile white walls of the room. A nurse peeked in, clipboard in hand, her voice soft and professional. "Mr. Jordan, will any family be visiting today?" Marcus turned his head slightly, a faint smile appearing on his lips. "No," he replied, his voice raspy but firm. "They're busy, like always." The nurse gave him a small smile, though her eyes lingered on him longer than usual. She had worked this floor for years, seen many patients left alone by their families. But there was something about Marcus. He wasn't like the others. He had a quiet strength, a calm dignity, despite the isolation. She made a note on her chart and left the room. Marcus turned back to the window, his eyes following the swaying branches outside. The world was alive with the colors of spring, a season he had once shared with his late wife, Angela. The cherry blossoms they had planted together now bloomed outside. The weight of solitude settled in his chest, not just from his illness, but from the years of quiet abandonment by his stepchildren, Sarah and Tom. They had once been his world, but after Angela passed, they slowly faded from his life. Visits became less frequent, calls were ignored, and eventually even their memories seemed to slip away. Marcus had never pushed them away, understanding their grief, their pain, and their loss. But in the quiet corners of his heart, a part of him always hoped they would return. Today he turned toward the bedside drawer and pulled it open with effort. Inside, nestled beneath an old photo and a crossword puzzle, was a thick envelope sealed with his careful handwriting. "To be opened upon my passing." His will. He had updated it 3 weeks ago. He exhaled a quiet breath, not out of anger or bitterness, but simply as a final acceptance. He placed the envelope back in the drawer and reached for the small book on his bedside table. He opened it, though his eyes did not follow the words. Instead, they rested on the faded photograph taped to the bedside. It was a photo of Angela, smiling at the beach with Marcus by her side, laughing. Sarah and Tom, both much younger, were there too. Sarah held in Marcus's arms, Tom beside him. He closed his eyes, the sound of the waves and the laughter of his children echoing in his mind. "Half to Angela, half to me," Marcus whispered. The world outside was moving on without him, but inside he still held on to the love that had once bound them all together. The days passed quietly. Marcus spent much of his time alone in his room, though he occasionally spoke to the nurses who came in to check on him. He had a small television on the wall, but it mostly sat silent, the flickering images of the outside world fading into the background. The hospital, though well-kept, had an air of coldness to it. It was as if the sterile white walls absorbed the warmth of the human presence, leaving behind only a mechanical efficiency. Marcus had long since ceased to feel the touch of a loved one. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the door to his room creaked open. A familiar figure stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the fading light. It was Sarah. Marcus's heart fluttered, though he kept his expression neutral. "Well, look who decided to stop by," he said, his voice still carrying a trace of weariness. "I thought I'd seen the last of you." Sarah hesitated, stepping further into the room, her eyes drifting over the now faded photographs on the walls. "I know I haven't been around much," she admitted, her voice unsteady. "I've been busy. Life." "Busy, huh?" Marcus replied, his gaze narrowing. "You and Tom both. Got your own lives, I suppose." He paused, then added, "I don't blame you." "I never did." Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her eyes avoiding his. The silence between them grew, thick with years of unspoken words. Finally, she spoke again. "I'm sorry, Dad." The words felt foreign in her mouth. She hadn't called him that in years. Marcus met her gaze, his eyes hard, but not unkind. "Sorry?" He repeated the word as if tasting it, then shook his head slightly. "It's too late for apologies, Sarah. It's too late for a lot of things." Sarah flinched at his words, but the tension between them did not break. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small gift bag, handing it to Marcus. "I brought you something," she said, her voice soft. Marcus raised an eyebrow, eyeing the bag suspiciously before taking it. He pulled out a small, neatly wrapped package and slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a leather-bound journal. It was beautiful, but it also felt too late. "It's for you," Sarah said quietly, "to write your thoughts. I know it's been hard, but I want to hear about everything. What you've been through. What's been in your heart?" Marcus stared at the journal for a long moment before setting it down on the bedside table. He let out a deep sigh. "You don't understand, Sarah," he murmured. "You don't understand what it's like to walk in my shoes, to be looked at like I don't belong. You don't know what it's like to be passed over because of the color of your skin." Sarah's face softened, but she said nothing. She had never fully understood, not in the way Marcus had hoped. Her life, after all, had been lived through a different lens. For a long time, neither spoke. The weight of their history hung in the air, unspoken, but felt. Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice quieter now. "I don't need your pity, Sarah. I never did. I just needed you to see me, to see us." Sarah remained silent for a moment, her eyes flickering between Marcus and the journal. She could feel the weight of his words, but she wasn't sure how to bridge the gap. Her life had been sheltered, easy in comparison. She hadn't had to fight for every inch of respect the way her father had. "I see you, Dad," Sarah said softly, finally breaking the silence. "I see everything, but there's only so much I can do. I can't fix it. I can't change the past." Marcus turned away slightly, his jaw tightening. He wasn't angry with Sarah, but the helplessness of the situation gnawed at him. "You don't have to fix anything, Sarah. I never asked you to." He paused, taking a breath, his voice softening. I just wanted you to understand." Sarah looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. She wanted so badly to reach out, to hold him, to comfort him. The room seemed to shrink around them, the tension thick in the air. Marcus finally spoke again, his voice quieter, almost to himself. "You think it's just about me, don't you? About what I've been through?" Sarah's eyes snapped to his, and she shook her head, her voice shaky. "No, Dad. I know it's not just about you. I know it's about everyone. I know how people see you. But do you really understand?" Marcus asked, his voice rising a little, frustration creeping in. "Do you understand what it's like to be dismissed every day? To be ignored just because of the color of your skin?" Sarah was silent for a long time, her thoughts racing. She wanted to tell him she understood, that she could empathize, but the truth was, she hadn't lived it. Her life had been privileged in ways she hadn't fully recognized until now. Finally, she whispered, "No, I don't understand. But I want to. I want to see it. I want to feel it, even if I can't live it." Marcus let out a soft, almost bitter laugh. "It's not something you can just want, Sarah. It's not something that can be learned in a moment. It's a lifetime of carrying the weight, of fighting every step of the way." He leaned back against the headboard of the bed, his eyes distant. "I've spent my entire life fighting for respect, for recognition, and all the while people like Tom and others, people who don't look like me, get the things I've worked for without a second thought. They get the benefit of the doubt." Sarah was silent, her heart heavy. The gulf between her and Marcus had never felt wider. But in the silence, she made a vow to herself. She would learn. She would never stop trying. The days after the conversation felt strange, like a veil of tension hung between Sarah and Marcus. There was no open hostility, but the air was thick with unsaid words, with emotions neither of them knew how to express. Marcus tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting back to the conversation he'd had with Sarah. It wasn't that he expected her to understand everything right away, but he hoped that, somehow, she would see the layers of complexity in his life. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself researching, reading, and listening. She started to watch documentaries about racial inequality, the struggles of Black communities, the history of racism in the country. She felt the weight of her privilege like never before. One evening, she sat across from her father at the kitchen table, holding a book in her hands. It was a collection of essays about race relations in America, and she had just finished reading one about the personal toll of systemic racism. "Dad," she began hesitantly, unsure of how to start, "I've been reading a lot lately. I think I'm starting to understand just a little bit more about what you've been through." Marcus looked up from his plate, his expression unreadable. He had hoped for a sign like this, but a part of him wasn't sure if it was enough to make a difference. "What do you think you understand?" he asked carefully, his voice cautious. Sarah took a deep breath. "I don't have the answers, Dad. I can't pretend that I know how you feel. But I've been learning about how racism isn't just something that happens in the past. It's something that's built into the system, the way things work. And that must have been so hard." Marcus nodded slowly, his face softening a little. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, and it gave him a sense of hope, a glimpse that maybe, just maybe, things could start to change. "It's more than hard," he said quietly. "It's like walking through life with a weight on your chest, like you're constantly being judged, constantly being measured by the color of your skin." Sarah nodded slowly, the words hanging in the air. She could feel the heaviness in them, and for the first time, she wasn't just seeing it from an intellectual perspective. She was beginning to feel it. "I can't change the world, Dad," Sarah said softly, "but I'll do what I can. I'll stand up for what's right. I'll make sure that my voice is heard, just like yours should be." Marcus smiled, a small, weary smile. "That's all I can ask for, Sarah." The conversation ended there, but it wasn't over. The road ahead was still long, still filled with obstacles, but for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt that there might be a chance for understanding, a chance for change. Weeks passed, and things slowly began to shift. Sarah found herself having more open conversations with her friends about race, and though many of them were uncomfortable, she didn't back down. She felt it was important to keep pushing the envelope, to challenge the status quo. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Sarah saw Marcus sitting alone on a bench. He looked deep in thought, his gaze fixed on the ground. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over to join him. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice soft. Marcus looked up, a slight smile crossing his face when he saw her. "Not at all. It's good to see you." "I've been thinking," Sarah began, hesitating for a moment before continuing, "about what you said the other night, about how you can't escape the weight of your skin. I've been trying to understand it more, really, and I think I've been blind to it for too long." Marcus's face softened, and for a moment the tension that had been there for weeks seemed to dissipate. "It's not easy, Sarah. It's not just about knowing the facts. It's about feeling it, living it. It's about knowing that no matter what you achieve, the world will always see you a certain way." Sarah nodded, her thoughts drifting back to the conversations she had had with her friends. Many of them had told her they didn't understand what she was talking about, that racism wasn't really a big issue anymore. Sometimes it feels like they'll never get it, she said softly, like they'll always be stuck in their own bubble. They don't want to see it, Marcus replied, his voice tinged with a sadness that had become all too familiar to him. It's easier to pretend everything is fine than to face the uncomfortable truth. But we can't change that for them. We can only change how we react to it. Sarah was silent for a moment, reflecting on his words. It was true. She couldn't force people to understand, but she could keep pushing forward, keep educating, keep speaking out. I don't know if I can change the world, Sarah said, looking at Marcus, but I'm not going to stop trying. I won't let it be the way it is forever. Marcus smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes this time. That's all anyone can do. Keep pushing, keep fighting. As they sat in the park, the evening sky slowly darkened, the last rays of the sun slipping behind the horizon. Sarah felt a sense of calm, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she could make a difference. It wouldn't happen overnight, but she was ready for the long journey ahead. The weeks that followed were challenging for Sarah. She attended more rallies, participated in community meetings, and tried to engage in more uncomfortable conversations. Some people supported her, while others remained indifferent and a few outright disagreed. The silence of the indifferent hurt more than the direct opposition. One day, after a particularly heated argument with a friend who accused her of being too extreme, Sarah felt defeated. She walked to the park, hoping to clear her mind. She found Marcus there, just as she had that day weeks ago. "You look troubled," Marcus said, looking up from the book he was reading. "Trong con ko velo lang." Marcus Noi, ngok len tu kwon sak ong jang jok. "I feel like I'm hitting a wall," Sarah admitted, sitting down next to him. "I thought I could make people see it, but it's so much harder than I imagined. Some of them just don't want to listen." Marcus closed the book and set it aside, giving her his full attention. "The thing about change," he said softly, "is that it never happens all at once. It's slow, it's painful, and it often feels like you're not making progress at all." "So what am I supposed to do?" Sarah asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "Ve kon fai lam gi, Sarah hoi su that vong bat jiao xuat hien trong gyong noi kwa ko." "You keep going," Marcus said firmly. "You keep having those conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. Even when people don't get it. You make space for those who want to learn, and you show them what you've learned. It's the only way to change things." Sarah let out a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't the answer she wanted to hear, but it was the truth. Change wasn't going to happen overnight, and the fight wasn't about winning every argument or changing every mind. It was about persistence. "You're right," Sarah said after a long pause. "I just need to keep going, even when it feels like nothing's changing." "Banoi jung," Sarah Noi, somot kwang im langdai. "Konchik and tep tuch, ngai kakikam giach no kongko, gide joy." "Exactly," Marcus said with a nod. "Change is a marathon, not a sprint." "Jung Roy, Marcus Noi Vagat Jiao. Tai Joy La Mot Kwok Jua Juong Dai, Kong Fai Mot Kwok Che Nuak Root." Sarah smiled at his words, feeling a small spark of hope ignite inside her. She knew the road ahead would be long, but for the first time in a while, she felt like she wasn't walking it alone. As the evening grew darker, the two of them sat in comfortable silence, knowing that they still had a long way to go, but they were no longer afraid of the journey. Weeks passed, and Sarah continued her work with the community. She had begun to find strength in the conversations she was having, even when they were difficult. She had come to understand that it wasn't about immediate results, but about planting seeds of change that would take root over time. One evening, Sarah received a phone call from her friend Maya, who had been skeptical of her efforts at first. "Sarah, I wanted to talk to you about something," Maya said. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, And I realized, you're right. Sarah felt a surge of hope. You're listening? She asked, surprised. Sarah kemte motia hivong bong len, benjang lang ng hea, shohoy ngachnien. Yeah, Maya continued. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I've seen some things lately that I can't ignore anymore. It's not just about what's happening in the news. It's about the small things too. The way people look at each other, the way they treat each other based on skin color. It's everywhere. Sarah felt her heart swell with gratitude. She had always believed that change started with one person, but hearing it from Maya, someone who had once been so distant, felt like a breakthrough. That's amazing, Maya, Sarah said. It's not easy to see it, but once you do, it's hard to unsee. Yeah, and I think I need to do more, Maya said thoughtfully. I want to help, but I don't know where to start. Sarah smiled, her voice full of encouragement. Start with small things. Talk to people, ask questions, even if it's uncomfortable. Share what you've learned. And when you see something wrong, don't stay silent. Your voice matters too. As the weeks continued to pass, Sarah and Marcus's bond grew stronger. They organized local events, spoke at rallies, and raised awareness within their community. But it wasn't just about speaking out. It was about creating a safe space where people of all backgrounds could come together and have real conversations. One afternoon, as they were wrapping up a community meeting, a young woman approached them. She had dark skin and wore a thoughtful expression. I just wanted to thank you both, she said quietly. I used to feel so alone in this fight, but now I feel like I have a place to belong. Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look, knowing that this was the impact they had hoped for. Change wasn't just about education, it was about connection, about people coming together to fight for something bigger than themselves. As the young woman left, Sarah turned to Marcus and smiled. This is just the beginning, isn't it? Marcus nodded, his eyes filled with quiet pride. Yeah, and it's going to take time, but we're doing it together. Sarah knew the path would continue to be difficult, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was alone in the fight. She was surrounded by people, people who cared, who were willing to listen, who wanted to change, and that, she realized, was the most important thing.